Hi guys, welcome to Raising Vibrations with myself, Simon. Today guys, I'm going to be bringing you a series on Pluto, and as you can see on the left hand side over there, it's the actual Pluto through the generations. So what my intention with this video is to basically share with you the archetypical desires and needs and evolutionary intentions that our generations have when we come through with our Pluto placement. Now, for every one of us, we've got Pluto somewhere in our houses, and be sure to check out the Pluto Through the Houses series that I created for you specifically in terms of what that means. But each of us have the Pluto through the generations. And collectively, as souls on Earth, we basically come through or incarnate during a period of time in which we as a collective are evolving through that exact same archetype, so that through that exact same sort of symbol. So for many of us that are born through the Pluto in Scorpio generation, we will have those basic Scorpio lessons to be learning as well, and what that actually symbolizes for our souls in that sense. So that's what I'm going to be doing with the series, is basically sharing with you, like I said, the archetypical intention of each soul through this generation, okay? And then basically linking that with your own birth chart, because that's one of the reasons as to why I actually do this YouTube channel, is to give you that free sort of astrology that you can kind of do it yourself in that sense, at least to kind of give you some perspective on what's going on, and to highlight more of an understanding of what the astro is all about, at least your soul's journey. So what are we going to be doing today is beginning with the Pluto and Scorpio generation. The reason why I'm actually beginning with them is simply because I actually flipped the coin before I was doing this, and you know, it's so conditional to just begin at Pluto and Leo and then go through Pluto and Virgo, etc., etc. But I was just like, nope, I'm gonna just randomly do this, and the three categories are Pluto and Sag, Pluto and Scorpio, and the Pluto and Libra. So I'm going backwards. And so Pluto in Scorpio is the one that I'm doing first. Okay, so right. Now, the first thing that you have to understand when it comes to understanding the nature of the Pluto through the signs is recognizing the actual symbolic archetype of Pluto itself, okay? Now, from a human point of view, in other words, the human condition itself, or manifested through the human condition, Pluto symbolizes well, from my point of view at least, and at least from the point of view of how the soul actually works, symbolizes the nature of desire, okay? And basically desire in itself is essentially what creates the experience of coming through on Earth and basically being reincarnated. And as long as there is imagination, as long as there's creativity, as long as there is a desire, there is reincarnation in that sense, because if I desire to become understanding of family dynamics from the point of view of life itself on Earth over here, then that desire will manifest and I'll be on your own Earth and I'll be experiencing all those dynamics. And if my desire changes and it becomes something about communication and that vibration, then I'll desire that and I'll come through with a series of lifetimes learning that dynamic. So the bottom line here, when we're looking at the nature of Pluto through the houses and through the actual birth chart itself, reflects and symbolizes the nature of desire. Now, from the point of view of the creation of everything, in other words, source energy, okay, the fundamental beginning phase of everything in itself, where everything began, source, okay, the nature of free will is intrinsic to it, okay, and this free will is linked to the desire to separate from source, okay, to move away from the center of gravity in a direction, to experience itself. So within desire, it is intrinsic that we have the desire to separate from source and the desire to return to source, okay? And it's these two desires that are operating simultaneously within our consciousness that essentially then propels the idea of reincarnation again, okay? So to simply be putting this in a clearer way, we have two desires within us. We either have the desire to separate from ourselves and to search for an essential meaning of life outside of us, okay? In other words, the meaning of my life is attached to my new car that I've just purchased. The meaning of my life is attached to, these wonderful array of things like the job title that I have, etc., etc. Or you can have the returning desire, which is to recognize that there is essentially a path that I am going on, and my desires are linked with this path. And when I start to ask the questions, why am I desiring this? What is the reason for this process? I'm essentially then turning back in on myself and reflecting on myself, which creates a sense of awareness. And this awareness then becomes the ultimate meaning behind creation itself, life on earth, etc. Is that we are just experiencing ourselves and more of ourselves. And from that point of view, we return back to ourselves. We return to the source of things. We return to self-awareness. Okay? So desire is linked with Pluto. Desire has these two operating functions, archetypes within them. They're a desire to separate, to experience everything outside of myself, i.e. to be born. And I have separating desires, you have separating desires. And when we recognize and align ourselves with a sense of spiritual understanding, then we are essentially asking ourselves the question, why am I doing this? What are my desires? What am I linking to? Why am I doing this process? That induces a state of self-awareness, which then reflects back on us, and we're returning back to ourselves. Okay, I'm doing this for this reason, that reason, that reason. I'm becoming aware of my process. I'm becoming aware of myself. I'm expanding my awareness. And as you go along. So Pluto is linked to that. Okay. Now, from the point of view of Pluto itself and then Scorpio, it's actually the same archetype in itself. Okay, so Pluto and Scorpio and the 8th house are all the same archetype within the zodiac signs. They are not separate in that sense. They all reflect the same archetype. And the archetype of desire is then obviously linked with Scorpio, and it's also linked with the 8th house. And a part of this process, a part of this Scorpio archetype, which is now what I'm going to be moving on to, is that Scorpio, 8th house, and Pluto itself reflects the nature of evolution. Okay, because we are in a constant state of becoming, even when we are taking our last breaths, we're in a constant state of becoming. In a very simple way that we can understand this understanding or this teaching is that if you just simply look at a baby at the age of when it gets born, and then you simply look at it 2 years afterwards, the progression of its development is measured through, for instance, now it doesn't have a dummy anymore, or it doesn't have any diapers on anymore, and that's how we are able to reflect back on that space to understand progression, and that we are always in a constant state of becoming, always in a constant state of changing. You're not the same person you were 6 years ago, etc. So Scorpio is linked with this process, the 8th house and Pluto and evolution. And the reason why this is the case, apart from the idea that we're constantly in a state of becoming, a constant state of self-awareness, is linked to the confrontation of our limitations. In other words, that we essentially place boundaries in our way that is what makes us feel comfortable. And then what happens is that when we are essentially become stagnant in that area, when there's no growth, we have the experience of limitations. And it is in those limitations themselves that then move us into a situation where we have to confront these limitations. So a simple way that this can be put is that a kid, for instance, is then living at his parents' home and up until the age of 30, and he essentially is unable to actualize his dreams. You know, he wants to become a writer, but he never actually recognizes these dreams within him. He knows that this is the case. He knows he wants to do this, but he can't. And he's unable to get a job and do this, you know, the whole sort of like conditioning story. The main purpose over here is that there is essential limitation within this person's consciousness that is linked to a sense of security. Well, what happens when you confront that and you say, right, why? Pluto questions, Scorpio questions, 8th house questions, why? What is stopping me? How can I overcome them? How can I remove these boundaries? How can I confront these situations that are essentially happening and basically putting boundaries around me? And then how can I better myself? How can I improve myself? How can I empower myself? And so from that experience of limitations, from that experience of evolution comes the nature of empowerment. In other words, Scorpio, to essentially merge with something, osmose with something that symbolizes a sense of power. And that empowerment process that we then go along that road. So we look at ourselves and say, okay, right, I'm now sitting in this situation. There's many limitations around me. I'm at my mom's dad's place. There's always conflict because they're always asking me to move out, or when am I going to get a job? When am I going to make something of myself, etc., etc. what happens is that we then look at and we say, okay, right, what is it that's going to get me this writing, career or this writing path? How am I going to do this? Right, the first thing is I see that there is a course over here that is essentially symbolizing becoming a better writer, or beginner's guide to writing. And through Pluto, desire, through Pluto, confrontation, we confront ourselves. We then look at that and we merge with that process. We osmose with it. We become that experience. It symbolizes a sense of empowerment because it essentially will remove our limitations. So from that point of view, the process of confronting limitations relative to empowerment is then linked with the Scorpio Pluto 8th house archetype itself. And through that, the natural process of evolution through confronting limitations. So when it comes to Pluto itself, from the soul's perspective, the nature of desire linked with continuous keep on moving to learn more, to empower more, to become more self-aware. And then at that same time, linked with that as well, is the nature of evolution. And so from that point of view, we have the whole archetype of the Pluto and Scorpio generation. What are their actual experiences going to be on Earth for us as humanity? And that is that from the point of view of the soul, is the highest vibration, the highest frequency that is linked with this archetype is linked with confronting the limitations that exist within our physical world. Now, there are many other aspects to this as well. This is not the only manifestation of it, but it is the ground thing, the confrontation and the asking of the questions, why? What is this experience? How can I improve from it? How can I empower myself? So every single person that is born with Pluto in Scorpio, when you have Pluto in Scorpio as a generation, as your generation, in other words, you have Pluto in the second house, but it's in Scorpio, right? Pluto, and this was between 1984 to 1995. This is when you would have been born through this generation. As a core occipital intent, your soul has come here to empower itself, to re-empower itself, to put itself into a situation where it is re-empowering the nature of itself through merging with relationships that symbolize a sense of empowerment, okay? And whatever that might symbolize to you, whatever that might be to you, it is that confrontation of limitations within, that sense of disempowerment. I don't like to be disempowered, so therefore I confront that. And then I merge with something that empowers me. And then so therefore I become stronger, I become bigger in that sense. From a spiritual perspective or from a physical perspective as well. It doesn't matter, whatever it is that you think you need that empowers you, you will merge a process with. So this can range from many, many things to somebody that thinks that Scorpio in the 7th house, in Pluto in the 7th house in Scorpio, and you will form a relationship with people that are essentially more powerful than yourself. And that symbolization of merging with those people, then you will essentially become empowered through that experience. You will think that that's what you need through that. You can be somebody that has Pluto in the 3rd house with Scorpio, and you will essentially you will merge with intellectual systems and properties and understandings and so on and so forth, that you will then merge with, and that will become your empowerment process, whatever it is in your chart, okay? Pluto in the 1st house in Scorpio, most likely going to be about your appearance and about your physical structure and the way that and the way that the world sees you in that sense. And so that is the bottom line of the Pluto in Scorpio generation. So you have come here to re-empower yourself completely. Now, from the point of view of Pluto itself, you would have also experienced a myriad of things in which loss, abandonment, and betrayal would have been, are very, very deeply rooted within your psychology. A lot of loss, a lot of abandonment, and a lot of betrayal, and misguided understanding of trust. Trust is such a huge aspect to this archetype itself, to the Pluto in Scorpio generation. And the reason why trust and all this abandonment and all this betrayal, etc., is linked to this process is because from the point of view of Scorpio, it makes a natural connection to Pisces and makes a natural connection to Cancer. And this natural trine in our zodiac teaches us that the ultimate sense of security can only be found from within, okay? And that's for many of our lives that we have lived, that sense of security has not been taught that we exist within. We search for that security unconsciously outside of ourselves. We place our security outside of ourselves. We put our emotional security in another person. We place our sense of a destiny and etc., outside of ourselves. And when it gets taken away, we then have this experience of going back in on ourselves and recognizing that we've been betrayed, that we've been abandoned, that these essential things that we have placed outside of ourselves that have been taken away from us are now affecting us in a way that is now being abandoned. People have misused our trust, etc., etc. And so there are deep psychological experiences in which there is no trust, or a need to develop trust, or how can I develop that trust? So these are very strong, deep psychological processes that your souls will be going through, that you're collectively as a race at this point in time, as a generation, working through, understanding the nature of trust, understanding the nature of where it's used, what not to trust. And you can see that at the moment in the world, a lot of Pluto in Scorpio generations do not trust the governments. A lot of Pluto in Scorpio generations do not trust the schooling systems and the teachers and the hierarchy and anybody that's essentially in power. And from humanity's perspective, and Pluto through Capricorn, the Scorpio generation, when you guys become in power, which will be some time from now, you will be the ones that will be completely and utterly transmuting the nature of our social structure, because you'll be the ones that will be not trusting anything that has originally come before. And so that transmutation takes place. And that's pretty cool to see in that sense. So from a generational perspective, you are actually coming through to transmute, change, and remove all the hierarchical misuse and guidance and structures that are in place as well. Coming back to the idea of empowerment and your own spiritual journey in itself, these collective experiences of abandonment, betrayal, loss, misuse of trust, etc., obviously leave you in a state of extreme amount of fear in some way, or paranoia. Now, I'm not saying that this is the general case, but a large part of this experience can be that, where becoming open in your heart can be very difficult because of that fact, feeling vulnerable, as it were. And so the lesson here for you as a generation, as you as souls, is to recognize that you can facilitate your own, you become self-reliant. You've got to be recognizing the polarity of the 8th house of Scorpio, which is Taurus. And Taurus teaches us complete and utter self-reliance, that I can be completely reliant on myself. And so the lesson here from a generational perspective, and the lesson here from what you need to understand going through your life, is constantly developing a sense of surety, a sense of stability within yourself, a sense of structure, and a sense of inner self-reliance. That if things get taken away from you, that everything will be okay. That you will be able to go through the process no matter how intense it might be. That experience of total self-reliance, the trust comes from within, to develop a strong vibration within you. That vibration works from within. And so that you can then practice that experience, and that you can allow us to then, or for the generations coming after you, to understand that vibration, so that you heal humanity in that way as well. Okay? Fantastic, guys. Well, I really hope that was, interesting for you guys to listen to. I really hope that gave you a little bit of insight into the nature of Pluto through Scorpio as a generational perspective. If you're interested in understanding the dynamics specific to you in your astrology chart, please come over to my website, simonvorster.com, and check out all the services that I have over there and book a reading with myself. Other than that, make sure that you're reading all the articles on Wake Up World. Go check them out. Go show them some love. They're a fantastic place that does a lot of spiritual enlightenment. They talk about everything, all the types of things that you need to be wanting to know, etc., etc. That's all over there. So check them out. Link is in the description. If you haven't known about my Facebook page, check that out as well. The links are in the description. Okay, guys, and like I said, hit the like and subscribe button, share the information, and I really hope that you enjoyed this. Until then, guys, have a fantastic evening. Take care. Bye-bye.